The guns around Asal-Uttar did not fall silent because one battlefield had answered every question raised by the war. They fell silent because both India and Pakistan, after weeks of escalation, fighting, losses, and danger, reached the limits of what could be gained by continuing. The UN-backed ceasefire of the 22nd of September 1965 brought the active war to a halt, while the Tashkent Declaration of the 10th of January 1966 tried to turn that halt into a political settlement. This matters for the story of armored warfare because even a famous tank battle ends inside a wider framework of diplomacy, exhaustion, and unresolved national purpose. Asal-Uttar had stopped a dangerous armored thrust, but it did not by itself settle Kashmir, end rivalry, or remove the causes of future war. If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore. By late September, the 1965 war had spread far beyond the hidden hopes of Operation Gibraltar. What began with infiltration in Kashmir had moved through Operation Grand Slam, India's crossing of the international border in Punjab, the fighting near Lahore, Sialkot, Kemkaran, and other sectors, and the air and artillery battles that supported the land campaigns. Armored forces had played a major role, but neither side had found a clean road to decisive victory. Pakistan had failed to break through at Asal-Uttar. India had gained important defensive and psychological success there, yet the wider war remained costly and unresolved. Both armies had taken losses, consumed supplies, and faced the hard realities of continuing a modern conventional conflict under international pressure. The ceasefire came after growing diplomatic pressure, especially through the United Nations, and after the realization that the war was producing danger faster than decision. A ceasefire is often described as a line in time, but on the ground it is a complicated military act. Units that have been fighting must stop firing without leaving themselves exposed. Commanders must confirm orders, control local actions, and prevent small incidents from reigniting larger violence. Soldiers who were attacking or defending only hours earlier now have to hold positions and watch former targets across a front that has not emotionally cooled. In armored warfare, this also means halting machines built for movement, recovering damaged vehicles where possible, and stabilizing supply and maintenance systems strained by battle. For India, the ceasefire preserved the meaning of Asal-Uttar as a defensive victory. Pakistan's drive through the Kemkaran sector had been stopped before it reached the Bias line, and the image of wrecked Pattons gave the result a powerful public form. But the ceasefire also froze the war before India could convert every local success into a larger political settlement on its own terms. Kemkaran itself had been contested, and the wider front included gains and losses that did not map neatly onto simple victory slogans. The Indian Army could point to resilience, adaptation, and the defeat of Pakistan's armored thrust, yet it still had to accept that battle success would be carried into negotiation rather than allowed to become unlimited military pursuit. For Pakistan, the ceasefire ended a campaign that had not achieved the transformation its planners had hoped for. Operation Gibraltar had failed to produce the political upheaval expected in Kashmir. Grand Slam had not produced decisive results before the war widened, and the armored thrust at Asal-Uttar had suffered a damaging defeat. Yet Pakistan was not erased as a military power, and the ceasefire allowed its forces to consolidate, explain, and recover from the shock of the Kemkaran battle. This is one reason ceasefires can be emotionally unsatisfying after major battles. The side that has won a visible battlefield success may feel denied a fuller decision. The side that has suffered a defeat may use the halt to prevent that defeat from widening. The Tashkent Declaration came months later, after talks hosted in the Soviet Union, and it called for a return to pre-war positions and a restoration of diplomatic relations. In plain language, this meant that much of what had been gained or held through blood and steel would be given back under political agreement. That is often hard for soldiers and civilians to accept. A tank crew that fought for a field, an infantry battalion that held a village, or an engineer unit that worked under fire may wonder why ground won at such cost is surrendered at a table far from the battlefield. But modern war is not fought by armies alone. It is fought by states, and states must weigh territory, international pressure, economic strain, and the danger of renewed escalation. The return to pre-war positions did not make Asal-Uttar meaningless. A battle can matter even when the map is later restored, because its effect lies in what it prevented and what it proved. Asal-Uttar prevented Pakistan's armored thrust from becoming a deeper crisis in Indian Punjab. It preserved India's defensive depth and helped shape the morale and bargaining atmosphere in which the war ended. It also became a lesson within both armies about the strengths and limits of armor in the subcontinental battlefield. The ceasefire and Tashkent settlement did not erase those effects. They placed them inside the larger truth that tactical and operational success often translates into political influence rather than permanent territorial change. For armored warfare, the end of the war exposed the tension between battlefield decision and strategic settlement. Tanks are designed to create movement, rupture, and shock. They can seize ground quickly, break weak fronts, and threaten objectives far behind the line. Yet the final meaning of their action may be determined by diplomacy, not by the furthest point reached. At Asal-Uttar, Pakistani tanks failed to reach the operational depth they sought, and Indian forces used terrain and combined arms to stop them. At Tashkent, however, the political settlement showed that even dramatic armored defeat or success is only one part of war's final accounting. Armored warfare can shape the negotiation, but it does not replace the negotiation. The ceasefire period also forced both armies to study what had happened. Militaries do not simply remember battles, they turn them into lessons, sometimes wisely and sometimes selectively. Indian accounts emphasized defensive skill, courage, and the defeat of Pakistan's patents. Pakistani reflection had to confront questions about planning, command, reconnaissance, terrain, and combined arms execution. Both sides had reasons to protect reputations and sustain morale, which meant that official and popular narratives did not always ask the same questions in the same way. The educator's task is to hold the operational lessons steady. Asal-Uttar mattered not because one side possessed virtue and the other possessed machines, but because one armored plan met a defense that reshaped the ground and broke its rhythm. The human transition from war to ceasefire was not simple. Wounded men still suffered after the last shots. Families still waited for news. Prisoners, missing soldiers, damaged villages, and mined fields remained as reminders that diplomacy does not instantly heal battlefields. Civilians near the front had to return, rebuild, or mourn amid damaged crops, broken roads, and the lingering danger of unexploded ordnance. Soldiers had to process what they had survived while remaining under orders in a tense environment. The aftermath of armored battle is especially heavy because machines leave large, visible scars. Burned tanks, churned fields, and damaged villages become physical memory, standing long after the political language has moved on. Tashkent also carried tragedy of another kind. India's Prime Minister, Lal Bahadur Shastri, who had led the country through the 1965 war and signed the declaration, died in Tashkent shortly afterward. His death added emotional weight to the settlement and complicated the way the war's ending was remembered in India. The declaration itself did not solve the underlying conflict between India and Pakistan, especially over Kashmir. It ended the immediate war, restored positions, and reduced the danger of continued fighting, but it did not remove the causes that had produced escalation in the first place. This unresolved quality is important. Asal-Uttar was decisive in its sector, but the war's political foundations remained unstable. The ceasefire and Tashkent Declaration teach that even the most vivid armored battle belongs to a larger arc. The tanks at Asal-Uttar mattered because they were part of a campaign, and the campaign mattered because it forced political decisions. A battlefield victory may stop an offensive, preserve a front, and reshape morale, but it still enters the world of diplomats, leaders, alliances, and public memory. That does not diminish the soldier's achievement. It makes the achievement historically legible. Asal-Uttar broke the momentum of a dangerous thrust. The ceasefire stopped the war. Tashkent tried to manage the consequences. The story ends not with a triumphant charge or a final explosion, but with armies halted, governments negotiating, and the central arguments of the conflict still unresolved.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.